The air in the lawyer's office was so thick with fake sympathy you could almost taste it. My parents had just dropped the bomb. They were giving my sister, Vanessa, the perfect one, their entire $10 million fortune. And me, I was left with a cold piece of advice. Earn your own. My sister actually smirked while my parents beamed, radiating a smug satisfaction. They thought they'd won. But then the lawyer cleared his throat. He picked up a dusty, sealed envelope. "There is one more item," he said, his eyes finding mine. "A letter from the late Mr. Henderson, the deceased's father, to be opened only at this reading." My whole life was a masterclass in being overlooked. Growing up in the hazy, humid air of Charleston, our family looked like a picture of Southern tradition and wealth, but the paint was already peeling. From the outside, we were the Hendersons. Inside, I was just Claire, the inconvenient shadow to my sister Vanessa's brilliant light. Vanessa was born for the spotlight. She had an easy charm, a pageant queen's smile, and a talent for reflecting our parents' ambitions right back at them. Every one of her achievements, no matter how small, was an excuse for a massive celebration. When she won her third-grade spelling bee, my father bought her a pony. When she was crowned prom queen, my mother commissioned a professional portrait and hung it in the grand foyer, right next to paintings of our ancestors. Her life was a series of catered parties and breathless praise. My world was much quieter. It was filled with books, the sprawling marshlands behind our family ranch, and the complex ecosystems that thrived just beyond our perfectly manicured lawn. Science was my refuge. I didn't bring home crowns. I brought home carefully mounted insect collections and projects that bubbled over in the garage. My victories were met with polite, but entirely vacant, smiles. I will never forget the year I won the state science fair. I had spent 6 months developing a sustainable water filtration system using native wetland plants. I was so proud, having poured my heart into solving a real-world problem. When I came home with the first-place medal and a scholarship offer, my mother was on the phone, arranging a lavish party. For a split second, my heart soared. Then I heard her say, "Yes, the theme will be silver and gold to match Vanessa's new cheerleading trophy." My win wasn't even a footnote. My medal was shoved in a drawer, while Vanessa's trophy got its own shelf in the living room. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandfather. He was my dad's father, a quiet, thoughtful man with hands weathered from a life spent working his ranch just outside Charleston. While my parents were busy molding Vanessa into a socialite, my grandfather would sit with me on the creaking porch swing, asking about my latest experiments. He would listen, really listen, as I explained photosynthesis or the migration patterns of local birds. His approval wasn't loud, it was a quiet, steady presence. "You've got a good mind, Claire," he'd say, his eyes twinkling. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for using it." He was my anchor in a family that felt like a stormy sea. But as he got older and his health began to fade, my parents became his gatekeepers. My visits grew shorter, more supervised. They'd claim he was tired, that I was wearing him out. I learned later they were telling him that I was busy, struggling in school, and too wrapped up in my own world to visit. They were systematically cutting the only thread that held me to that family, isolating me and setting the stage for the day they'd cut me out for good. That day had finally come. The crinkle of old paper brought us all back to the present. Mr. Abernathy, our family's lawyer for 3 generations, held the envelope with a reverence that felt utterly out of place. The seal was wax, stamped with my grandfather's signet ring, a live oak. My father shifted in his chair, his face a mask of impatience. "What is this, Abernathy? Some sentimental trinket? My father's affairs are settled. Vanessa gets the trust, we get the properties. Claire gets our best wishes, it's done." "With all due respect, John," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice firm, "your father's final instructions were crystal clear. This letter is to be read as part of his last will and testament." He didn't look at my father. He looked directly at me. It was the first time all day anyone had. My sister Vanessa let out an audible sigh. "Honestly, Grandpa was so dramatic. Can we just get on with this? I have a lunch reservation." She glanced at her diamond watch, a recent gift from our parents. The casual cruelty of it was stunning. They had just publicly disowned me, and she was worried about making it to a restaurant I could no longer afford to even look at. Mr. Abernathy slid a letter opener through the wax seal. The sound cracked through the silent room like thunder. He unfolded the thick pages, covered in my grandfather's familiar, spiky handwriting. He cleared his throat. "It is addressed to Claire," he said, and began to read. "My dearest Claire, if you're hearing this, then I've gone on to whatever lies beyond the marshlands. Don't you mourn me for too long, my girl. A mind like yours has too much work to do to be clouded by grief. I have watched you grow from a curious child collecting fireflies in a jar to a brilliant young woman who understands the very light they produce. I have never been prouder. I'm writing this because I know what likely just transpired in this room. I know my son and his wife. I know their priorities. I imagine you're feeling lost, hurt, and utterly alone. I am so deeply sorry for the part I played in your pain. My silence wasn't out of indifference, but part of a strategy I hope you'll come to understand. For years, your parents have been spinning a story. To you, they painted me as a frail old man, fading away. To me, they painted you as a lost girl, squandering your potential. They told me you were failing your classes, that you had no ambition, that you were ungrateful. They did this, I believe, to justify their own actions and to ensure my legacy would pass through them to Vanessa, the daughter they could control. They knew that if I truly understood your intellect and character, my plans for the future would look very different. But I saw through it, Claire. I saw it in the way your eyes lit up when you talked about your projects. I saw it in the calluses on your hands. And I saw it in the letters you wrote me, letters I now know your parents frequently intercepted. They couldn't hide your light. They could only try to convince me it wasn't there. So I played my part. I let them believe I was a doddering old fool. I let them manage my finances, thinking the ranch and all its assets would simply become theirs, and then Vanessa's. But a man who's run a ranch for 60 years knows a thing or two about planning. You don't just plan for the next season, you plan for the next generation. Your parents gave Vanessa their money, that's their right, but they cannot give away what was never theirs. Years ago, I established an independent, ironclad trust. The Henderson Ranch, all 500 acres, the house, the outbuildings, the waterways, and all assets tied to it are held in this trust. They were never part of my personal estate. They were never under your father's control. And today, my dear Claire, that trust transfers to you. The ranch is yours. But that's not all. For the past 5 years, while your parents thought I was napping on the porch, I was busy. Remember the old, dilapidated barn at the far end of the property? The one you loved to play in? It's not dilapidated anymore. I've spent a small fortune converting it into a state-of-the-art biological research annex. It has everything you'll ever need. A full laboratory, computer systems, living quarters. Everything I knew you dreamed of, and everything your parents told you was a foolish waste of time. This is your inheritance, Claire. It's not money to be spent, it's a legacy to be built. They told you to earn your own. And I have given you the tools to do just that on the very land our family has called home for a century. Don't let their bitterness poison this gift. Their choices are their own. Your future is now yours. Make me proud. All my love. Grandpa. Silence, a profound, deafening silence, broken only by a small, choked gasp from my mother. I looked down and realized my hands were clenched into fists. My father's face went a terrifying, mottled shade of red. "This is absurd," he stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the lawyer. He wasn't of sound mind, he was senile. She manipulated him. Mr. Abernathy didn't flinch. He calmly placed the letter on the desk. "John, your father was more sound of mind than anyone in this room. The trust was established 7 years ago, witnessed by 2 federal judges and a psychiatrist who certified his lucidity. He updated the annex plans as recently as 6 months ago. Every receipt is logged. It is, I assure you, the most legally unassailable document I have ever seen." My mother started to cry, not quiet tears of grief, but loud, ugly sobs of pure rage. "Our home," she wailed. He gave her our home. But it was Vanessa's reaction I'll never forget. The smirk had long since melted away, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed confusion. Her perfect, manicured world, built on parental adoration and guaranteed wealth, had just been demolished. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. For the first time, she wasn't looking at her weird, invisible sister. She was looking at the woman who owned her past. The family legacy, the historic ranch she bragged about to her friends, it wasn't hers. It was mine. She looked from our parents to me, and I think in that moment, she finally understood the lie she had been living. I didn't feel triumphant or smug. I just felt a huge, gut-wrenching wave of grief and relief all at once. I stood up, my legs shaking. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice hoarse. And without another look at the shattered remains of my family, I walked out of that room and into my new life. The first time I drove up to the ranch as its owner felt completely surreal. The sun filtered through the ancient live oaks and their Spanish moss, casting long shadows across the lane. The air smelled of salt and sweet, loamy pluff mud. This place wasn't just property, it was a living piece of our history. I walked through the old house, the floors creaking a familiar welcome, but my real destination was the barn. From the outside, it looked the same, weathered and rustic, but when I slid open the heavy door, my breath caught in my throat. It was everything he said: gleaming stainless steel, humming servers, microscopes, centrifuges. In the center was a large workbench. On it was a single, framed photo of my grandfather and a much younger me holding a jar of fireflies. Tucked into the frame was a small note in his handwriting: "For my little scientist. Now go change the world." The next few months were a blur of hard work and healing. I moved into the living quarters at the annex and poured my soul into the work my grandfather made possible. I started my research on the local marsh ecosystems, the very thing my parents had dismissed as a hobby. I secured grants, published papers, and began collaborating with universities. My family name, once a source of pain, was now attached to legitimate scientific work. My grandfather said a legacy is something you build, so I started a program for underprivileged kids from Charleston. Every weekend, a bus brings a dozen middle schoolers out to the ranch. I teach them about ecology, let them use the lab, and show them that science isn't some abstract thing in a textbook. I see my own quiet, curious childhood self in their eyes. I'm giving them what my grandfather gave me: a space to be seen and a chance to thrive. As for my parents and Vanessa, their world shrunk. They still had their money, but in a place like Charleston, where lineage and legacy are everything, they lost something far more valuable: their standing. The story of the will reading got out, of course. Whispers followed them. They became a cautionary tale, the couple who tried to disown one daughter, only to be outsmarted by their own patriarch. About a year later, a car I didn't recognize drove up the lane. It was Vanessa. She got out, looking hesitant and small without our parents flanking her. She was just wearing jeans and a simple shirt. "I saw the article about your youth program," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's impressive, Claire." I just nodded, waiting. "They're furious," she continued, gesturing vaguely back toward the city. "At you, at Grandpa, at the world. They don't understand how it all went so wrong." She finally looked at me, her eyes clear of their old arrogance. "But I think I do. We were all playing roles in a story they wrote for us. You were just the only one brave enough to write your own." It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was the truth. It was the first honest thing she had ever said to me. "I'm not the villain in your story, Vanessa," I said quietly, "and you don't have to be the villain in mine." She stayed for another hour. I showed her the lab and explained my research. For the first time, she listened with genuine curiosity. There was no easy hug, no movie moment of forgiveness. The wounds were too deep for that. But as she left, she paused and said, "What you're doing here, it feels more Henderson than any party they ever threw." I never got my family back, at least not the one I grew up with. But standing on the porch of my grandfather's house, watching the sun set over the marsh, I realized I had received something far more precious. He hadn't just given me a ranch or a lab. He had given me back my own story. He cleared away all the noise and left me with the quiet, unshakable truth of my own worth. And that's a legacy no amount of money can ever buy. It's a strange thing, family. Sometimes the people who are supposed to see you most clearly are the ones who refuse to look at all. In the end, it's not about what you're given, but what you choose to build with it. And that is a foundation that can never be taken away.